Now, Ross Kaminsky.
Come on, man.
On Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
All righty, good morning. Happy Tuesday. I'm Ross. The second impeachment trial starts today. We're going to talk about that more in a little bit. We're up on YouTube, according to DJ Shannon. If you go to youtube.com, type in Ross Kaminsky, you should see me live here in the KHOW studio with my Daniel Defense shirt on. Why not, right? So I want to actually take a moment and respond to a friend and listener named Todd. Todd texted this comment. It's hard for me to believe this, meaning the impeachment, is constitutional if the Chief Justice, who according to the Constitution is supposed to preside over the Senate trial, isn't there. Now, that is an interesting argument, and I'm going to talk about it for a minute. I don't think it's correct, but I do think that a lot of people will believe it, especially people who, like we talked about with Andy McCarthy, right? Throughout this thing, people are going to believe what they want to believe. They're going to believe what they already believe. People who are against the trial are going to find every reason to oppose it. People who are for it are going to find every reason to support it. And almost nobody's mind is going to be changed about anything. Now, here's the deal with the Chief Justice and not presiding over the trial, and why some people argue that means it's not legitimate, and why I argue that other argument is wrong. So, the Constitution says that in a trial of a president, the Chief Justice of the United States will preside. Why is that? The reason is that otherwise, it is possible that the Vice President of the United States would preside. And the founders understood that you could not allow a situation where the person presiding over an impeachment trial would be in a position to become President of the United States if the person who was being impeached was convicted. And therefore, specifically, when it came to an impeachment trial for a president, and only for a president, the Constitution has this provision that prevents the Vice President of the United States from even possibly presiding over the trial for that reason. Donald Trump is not President of the United States. And the purpose of having the Chief Justice preside over a trial is not just a formality in the sense, well, it's a president, so we're going to have a sort of perceived higher-ranking person or something like that with the Chief Justice. It's not this formality that president, so Chief Justice, just because. It's for that reason that I already explained. And therefore, since Donald Trump is not President of the United States, even though he was when he was impeached, this is not actually an impeachment of a president. It is not a trial. It was an impeachment of a president, but it is not a trial of a president. And that means that even if the Vice President of the United States were to preside over the trial, it would not be a situation where the Vice President would then become president if the person were convicted. And therefore, that provision in the Constitution that talks about the Chief Justice presiding over the trial of a president is irrelevant. It isn't the function and the thought process behind having the Chief Justice is about a trial of a sitting president. Now, the Constitution doesn't use the word sitting, but it does use the word president, and Donald Trump was president, but he's not president. And so I believe that the argument that the trial is illegitimate because John Roberts isn't presiding over it is a particularly weak argument, although it is making its way around conservative social media. I think most people will, even if they were thinking what Todd was thinking, might understand after my explanation that there's no need for the Chief Justice and it's not required in this situation, because the purpose of that was to prevent somebody from presiding over a trial who could become president if the person who was impeached was found guilty. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, Shannon? Did I explain that adequately? All right. So there you go. There's that question. There's a lot of questions out there about the constitutionality of this, and I will say there are very big brains on both sides of it. There are very credible lawyers who say that the trial is not constitutional. There are more lawyers and credible lawyers who believe that it is constitutional, and I believe that it is as well, having nothing at all to do with any opinion about Trump or the merits of the case. I just think it's constitutional. One other quick thing I'll note on that, actually. There's a lot of talk about this Belknap situation from the late 19th century. And this was a case of a trial after someone was not in office anymore. And the Senate, not only did they have the trial, but before they had the trial, they had a vote on whether they were allowed to have the trial. And they voted that they were allowed to have the trial, and then they had the trial. And some people think that the Supreme Court might get involved in this situation and answer the question about whether the trial is constitutional. My guess is that the Supreme Court would not even take the case, at least not now, right? I don't think ever. I think if the argument got to the Supreme Court saying we need you to decide whether this trial can proceed, the Supreme Court would say the Constitution gives authority over impeachment trials to the Senate, and it is for the Senate to decide whether they can have a trial or not. And if the people believe that the Senate decided wrongly, then whenever they get the chance, people can elect new senators. We forget, way too often, we forget that the proper remedy for almost all political problems in the United States of America, the remedy is elections. We forget that all the time. We talk about this stuff as if, we've got these evil politicians and we need to do this or that about them. And we do have a lot of bad politicians. But we forget that we have a lot of bad politicians because we have a lot of voters who voted for bad politicians. We have a lot of voters who vote for people to dump another $2 trillion of debt on my kids and yours and their kids. We have voters who put an insane socialist anti-Semite in office in Ilhan Omar, and an insane non-socialist anti-Semite in office in Marjorie Taylor Greene. And whether or not we like these people, one of the most important aspects of maintaining a level of stability as a functioning democratic republic is respect for the will of the voters. And there's almost no circumstance under which the will of the voters should be trumped by something else. It happens rarely when something is so egregious that it needs to be acted on now and cannot wait for the next election. An impeachment of a president. Tossing a judge off of a federal bench, that would not be subject to the next election anyway because that's life tenure, but that's an example of something where you could overturn, that's not the will of the voters either, but you can overturn something that was already in place. Expulsion of a member from the House or Senate, that almost never happens. Normally, you just wait for the election. And we should remember that here too. Remember, we're in the terrible situation that we're in. When Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House, and Chuck Schumer now as majority leader of the Senate because we had President Trump and some of his most fervent public supporters convince the public to vote for Democrats because Trump and his supporters were too insane, which is a tragedy because the vast majority of Donald Trump's policies were infinitely better than any policy the Biden administration will come up with. And now that there's a Democratic Senate, they're going to get a lot of stuff through that they would never have gotten through. And Bernie Sanders is chairman of the Budget Committee. Are you kidding? It's the will of the voters. And you might say voters made a mistake, but that's not really the point. The point is, if you don't want voters to make that kind of mistake, then be a better candidate or be a better party or have a better message or tell a better story. And Republicans usually don't tell a very good story. Democrats, even though they lie a lot, they tell very good stories. And Republicans need to start telling a better story and start tossing out these bad politicians. Start tossing out these bad politicians of the left and the right. Get rid of Ilhan Omar. Get rid of AOC. Get rid of Nancy Pelosi. Look, these people are probably not going to lose unless they just decide not to run because they're from very, very left-wing districts. But in swing districts, get rid of the Democrats. Get rid of Michael Bennet. He doesn't do anything. I heard in KHOW News this morning that some radical Democrats here in Colorado are trying to get John Hickenlooper censured. I mentioned this on the show the other morning. It was as shocking to me as anything I could have imagined that my first comment about John Hickenlooper as senator was a compliment. Right? I remember, Shannon, watching your face when I was telling that story, and you couldn't believe it either. This measure came up in the Senate that said that illegal aliens are not entitled to redistributed taxpayer money through COVID relief or anything else, right? Not going to give checks to illegal aliens. John Hickenlooper was one of 8 Democrats who voted in favor of that measure to not let illegal aliens get taxpayer money. 8 Democrats. There were 2 in Arizona. There were 2 in Michigan, Hickenlooper, and then 3 others around the country. 42 Democrats voted no on that. They're fine with giving illegal aliens taxpayer money. And Democrats now want to censure John Hickenlooper. I actually had a little brief back and forth thing on Twitter with some liberal about this. And I said, why should an illegal alien get my kids' future federal income tax payments? And this person tweeted back, well, because they're a human being? And let me just say for the record, from the mindset of a woke liberal who doesn't understand the proper function of government, I understand that argument. If you don't understand the purpose of government, and if you believe that the purpose of government is to help the downtrodden and to harm the wealthy, then you don't care who you're giving the money to. Give it to anybody. I didn't get into this whole thing with him, but it's not only that I object to illegal aliens getting federal tax dollars. I do object to that. But I actually object to most people getting just redistributed money that other people earned. I'm against the welfare state. I would much rather see this kind of stuff handled by charities. by nonprofits. Now, I'm not naive enough to believe that we're going to get rid of the welfare state, but I would if I could. I have my libertarian perspectives and dreams, but it doesn't mean that I live in a dream world where all these things happen, or the left's dream world where we have an entirely emissionless economy with vehicles powered by the only emissions that will remain permitted under federal law at that time, namely unicorn farts. Unicorn farts will be the only source of energy that will be allowed when Democrats have full control. And Elon Musk is going to have to come up with some kind of motor for the next generation of Tesla that can run on unicorn farts, because they're the only thing that will be permitted. Now, I don't know how you capture the unicorn fart, whether you have to line up the back of a unicorn directly with some kind of tank on your new Tesla, whether there's a special tube, whether the unicorn fart has to be concentrated before it is then, put somewhere where your vehicle can use it. I don't know how all that works. Yes, Gorilla Glue. Maybe you Gorilla Glue the back of a unicorn, the back end of a unicorn onto your Tesla. That would be kind of odd, but no odder than anything else. I better not give them any ideas. Anyway, look, my bottom line is this. If you want better politics, elect better politicians. We'll be right back on The Ross Kaminsky Show.
This is Denver's Talk Station with Ross Kaminsky now, Michael Brown at 2.